sources, and I was preparing these sources, and it was too much for Word. Word kept crashing. I'm hoping you'll be able to do a better job and retain the information better than Word. Okay? Um, we're going to deal with the concept of the berit, the covenant that we contracted with God on Har Sinai. And this is perfect timing for Shavuot, right? What happened on that day, the 6th of Sivan, year 2448, out there in Midbar Sinai, presumably somewhere in the Arabian desert? All right, we contracted a covenant with God, and we'll also understand when Jeremiah, talks about contracting a new covenant, a Berit Hadashah, what the Christians translated into a New Testament. We'll see what is he talking about over there. Okay, is there a new covenant? Did God replace his nation with another nation? What is that concept of a new covenant? Okay, so first, let's understand what is the covenant. What was the process of contracting an agreement with God? So we're in Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, chapter 19. B'chodesh HaSheni, right, on the third month, they said, Bnei Israel me'eretz Mitzrayim, the third month, we left Egypt in Nisan. So there's Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. We're now in the month of Sivan. Bayom hazeh, on this day, Ba'u midbar Sinai. They came to the wilderness of Sinai. ויסעו מרפידים, ויבואו מדבר סיני, ויחנו במדבר, and they came and they encamped in the wilderness, in the desert. ויחן שם ישראל נגד ההר, and they camped right in front of the mountain, Mount Sinai. Moshe עלה אל האלוהים, and Moshe goes up, he ascends the mountain, goes up to God. ויקרא אליו אדוני מן ההר לאמור, and God calls out to him and he says, כה תאמר לבית יעקב ותגד לבני ישראל. I want you to go to the people and tell them this. I have a proposal for them. אתם ראיתם אשר עשיתי למצרים, ואשא אתכם על כנפי נשרים, ואביא אתכם אליי. Right? You saw what I did to Egypt. What is God doing now? He wants to contract, make an agreement with the Jewish people. He's fond of them for some reason. And he says, first thing he wants to do is he wants to establish his credibility with the people. I am the person, I am the God that took you out of Egypt, and I brought you to me on wings of eagles, and brought you to me to this place. And now the proposal. Ve'ata, and now, Im shamoa tishmeu bekoli, you listen to my voice. Ushmartem et beriti, and you keep my covenant that we're going to contract, right? V'hiye misegula mikol ha'amim, and you shall be, how does it say, mine own treasure among all peoples, a special nation unto me, right? Kili kol ha'aretz, because the whole world is mine, and out of this whole world, I want you to be my nation. Okay? That's one side. If we accept the covenant, meaning to become his special nation, then what will we get? Ve'atem tiyuni mamlechet kohanim ve'goy kadosh. Then you shall be a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. A goy kadosh, a holy nation, meaning we have a lot of extra misvot that we do. Besides the 7 that all of humanity has to do, we have 613, right? And you will be a priestly nation. You will be a superpower. You will be an empire. I will make you a big and strong nation. Right? Mamlechet Kohanim. You'll be a strong kingdom. So that's the proposal. Now, a lot of people misunderstand these two pesukim, these two verses. And some try to say that we are a special nation, the chosen people, so to speak. We're the chosen people to God only on the condition that we fulfill the commandments, the 613 mitzvot. As soon as we stop or don't fulfill all the commandments, we are no longer a special nation to God. But that's not what God is saying. God is saying, if you make a covenant with me, thereby being a special nation, then when you listen, when you follow, comply with the mitzvot, ואתם תהיו לי ממלכת כהנים וגוי קדוש. You'll be a mighty nation, and you will represent me to the world. What happens when we don't? We're still a chosen people, but we're not a mighty nation anymore. We are what Rabbi Yehuda HaLevi, the author of Sefer HaKozari, are you familiar with Sefer HaKozari? Kozari talks about a nation that came and converted to Judaism, the Kozarim, and the original name of the book, the Kozari, was the justification for the humiliated nation. All right, because the Jewish people for the past 2,000 years have been a humiliated nation. That is the other side of the coin. If we don't keep the mitzvot, right, if we don't follow the terms of the covenant, it's not that we're no longer a chosen people. We were chosen to either be a humiliated nation or to be a mighty kingdom. But we're still the chosen people. Okay? So Vayavo Moshe Vayikra leziknei ha'am. So now Moshe comes down and he calls to the elders of the nation. Vayasem lifnehem et kol hadevarim ha'ele. And he puts forth to them the proposal. God gave a proposal. What do you say? Vaya'anu kol ha'am yahadav vayomeru. And the entire nation responds. What happened here? He was talking to the elders. So there's another step here. The elders spoke to the people speak to the elders, they represent, and they now respond and they accept this proposal. ויענו כל העם יחדיו ויאמרו כל אשר דיבר אדוני נעשה. All that God has spoke, we will do. What does that mean? We will do. What will we do? Any idea? Anybody? What does that mean? We
The
will do.
mitzvot, right?
All that we will do. Sorry?
The mitzvot, right?
But we didn't receive any mitzvot yet. It says all that God said we will do. Right now, all they are agreeing to is to contract a covenant with God. Meaning,
it's like
we will
can
be
I
a
say?
special nation to God, and God will be our Lord. So, what were you saying?
It's like we accept first, and then we do, and then we hear.
So God just gave a very general proposal. We still don't know the mitzvot. God says, I am the one who took you out of Egypt. Do you want to make a covenant with me? And the people say, you know what? We're happy with the way you've led us up until now. Yeah, we'll be a special nation unto you. We'll accept you as our God, as our legislator, the one who could make laws for us. We don't even know what the laws are yet. At this point, we're just accepting God's general proposal to be his special nation. And then, so the whole nation, they all answer in one voice. Everything that God says, that God said, yeah, we'll do. We'll make the covenant. Moshe then relates this acceptance by the people back to him. Moshe is serving here as like a negotiator between the people and God. He's representing God to the people, and he's representing the people to God. All right, and now we get to Ma'amad Har Sinai, right? This is the introduction to the Ten Commandments that we heard at Sinai. V'yomer Adonai Moshe, and God says to Moshe, Hine anuchi ba elecha be'av ha'anan. I am now going to reveal myself, right? I'm coming to you in this fog, in this cloud. Ba'avur yishma ha'am bedabiri imach. This way the people can hear me speaking to you. V'gam becha ya'aminu le'olam. This way, it says, and may also believe in you forever. What does that mean, to believe in you? Right? Leha'amin in Hebrew comes from the root word emet, aleph mem taf, emet. It means to verify. It's not some sort of blind, empty faith. It says, in order for you to be my representative to the people need to be able to testify and verify that I actually speak to you. So these people today, okay, God took us out of Egypt. He did all these miracles for us, and he negotiated some sort of agreement between us and God. But another 3 generations, well, how do we know that Moshe actually spoke to God? Maybe he was just making things up. He says, no. So God is saying, I want the people, the entire nation, to witness me speaking to you. V'gam becha ya'aminu le'olam, right? They'll have a testimony that can be transmitted in a masoret, in a tradition from one generation to another. Because the way tradition works is a testimony in court. I heard this from this person, right? We have a whole tractate in the Mishnah. It's called Masechet Eduyot, the tractate of testimonies, where people are coming to the court in order to make the Mishnah. People are coming to the Supreme Court and testifying to traditions that they heard their rabbi from their teachers, taking place in front of the entire nation. Everyone is a witness to this event, as it did. וגם בך יאמינו לעולם, ויגד משה את דברי העם אל אדוני, right? And Moshe went to Moshe לך אל העם וקידשתם היום ומחר וכיבסו סמנותם. He says, go and prepare the nations, right? They need to be ready for the 3rd day. ויהיו נכונים ליום השלישי. On the 3rd day they should be ready. This is going to happen. I'm going to speak to you in front of everybody. They should wear clean clothes, and it's a very special event. כי ביום השלישי, because on the 3rd day, ירד אדוני לעיני כל העם על הר סיני. God is going to descend upon Mount Sinai in front of the entire nation. והגבלת את העם סביב לאמור, all right, I say how you should prepare the mountains so the people don't come up, all right? And what happens then? ויוצא משה את העם לקראת האלוהים, and on the 3rd day, right? ויהי ביום השלישי ביות הבוקר, on the 3rd day in the morning, ויהי קולות וברקים וענן כבד על ההר וקול שופר חזק מאוד. There's this tremendous event. We hear thunder and there's lightning coming from the mountain. We hear the sound of the shofar, and it's getting stronger and stronger. ויחרד כל העם אשר במחנה, and the entire nation trembles from this experience. It's a very, very traumatic experience. ויוצא משה את העם לקראת האלוהים מן המחנה, and Moshe brings the people out from their encampment to right before God, meaning to the bottom of Mount Sinai. ויתייצבו בתחתית ההר, and they all stand at the bottom of Mount Sinai. והר סיני עשן כולו, and the entire mountain is trembling, it's shaking. There's a huge earthquake, right? There's a steam coming out of it. מפני אש אשר ירד עליו אדוני, because God descended on it באש, in fire. ויעל עשנו כאש כבשן, ויחרד כל ההר מאוד. And so before the people were trembling, and now the mountain itself is trembling. This is a huge event, traumatic event. Vahikol hashofar holech v'chazek meod. And they hear the sound of the shofar. It's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Moshe yedaber. Moshe speaking to God. V'ha'elohim ya'anenu bekol. And God responds in the sound. The sound that the people hear is the sound of the shofar. There's this tremendous sound. All right? And this is how they hear God speaking to Moshe. Right? There's one voice, one sound, which communicates the entire Ten Commandments. The people find the sound to be kind of unbearable for them. To the point where the Midrash says that when God spoke, the people died, and they were brought back to life, and they went to Moshe and they said, "Al yidaber imanu penamut," right? God shouldn't speak to us because we're afraid to die again, right? Daber ata imanu v'nishma, right? You speak. Right? We saw God speaks to you. We believe you. We got it. We got the point. From now on, we can't bear God speaking directly to us. God will speak to you, and you communicate to us what God said. Okay? And in this event, Moshe was established as God's messenger. Right? We appointed Moshe to speak to us on God's behalf. And we appointed Moshe to speak to God on our behalf. So Moshe is the appointed messenger of God, and he's the appointed, more importantly for us, he's our appointed messenger, right, to negotiate this covenant with God. It says, "Vaydaber Elohim et kol hadevarim ha'ele lemor," and God spoke these things, right? What previously was described as the sound of the shofar, where we hear God speaking, this is what he actually spoke. Just the people couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, but what was important is that they heard God speaking. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, asher hoseticha me'eretz Mitzrayim beit avadim, says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other God before me. Right? And here he goes over the 10 commandments, right? Keep Shabbat, don't make idols, don't worship others, don't murder, don't steal, right? All the 10 commandments. And then, right after that, we have Parashat Mishpatim, right? The end of Parashat Yitro ends with the 10 commandments. And from there, we go on to Parashat Mishpatim. Ve'ele ha'mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. And these are the laws that you should put before them. And we have an entire parasha now full of laws. Not 613 laws, but there's a whole body of law over there, which is the basis of all the laws that will come afterwards. We're not going to go through all these laws over here now, but it starts with slavery laws, murder and damages if two people fight and one person gets injured. To what does he have to pay? There's different kind of penalties he has to pay. He needs to pay for him for his medical bills. Avot nesikin, right? Property damages. You have you have an ox and it goes out and it does damage to your friend's property. What are you liable for? In what case? You have to pay full compensation. What pays only half, right? Gonev, what happens if someone steals and he's caught stealing and they find the thing that he stole? then the din arba shumrim, the four guards, right? If you lend something to someone and he loses it, or you ask someone to keep an eye on your bag for a minute and then he gets robbed, is he liable? Is he not? It depends. What kind of a guard was he appointed as? Is he being paid for it? Is he not being paid? Right? All the basic laws of, we call it civil law, is contained in here. Laws of property. We go into laws of loans and interest, justice, Shabbat, and all the holidays. They're also here in Parashat Mishpatim. And then at the end of Parashat Mishpatim, all those laws, is the land of the covenant. Hine anuchi shulech malach lefanecha, yishmurcha baderech. Behold, I'm sending an angel before you to bring you in a makom asher achinu, to bring you to the place where this berit is going to take place. Right? You can't be a mighty kingdom without a country, without a land. So where is this going to take place? And it defines the place, right? Hishamin mipanav. Listen to this angel. He says also, make sure when you conquer this land, you get rid of everybody. That's part of the terms of the covenant. Don't leave them there. They're going to be a problem for you. They're going to cause a mess. Right? Lo tichrot lahem ve'elohem berit. I'll read it out in English here. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, no Oslo, no peace deals with any of the inhabitants of the land. You get rid of them. They're gone. Lest they make thee sin against me, or serve their gods, for they will be a snare unto you. Kitavot ki elecha nemokesh. They're gonna be problems for you. All right. Now this all took place in Ma'aman Har Sinai. We still didn't contract the berit. All we did at this point was agree to contract a berit with God. God revealed himself so that everybody can hear that he speaks to Moshe. And these are the things that he spoke to Moshe. On the next day, it says, Ve'en Moshe Amar, he says, here we go. This is at the end of Parashat Mishpatim. It says, and he says to Moshe, Alein Adonai, Ata ve'Aaron Nadav Avihu, come up to me, you and your brother Aharon, his two sons Nadav and Avihu, V'shiv'ei miziknei Yisrael, and the 70 elderlies of the Supreme Court, right? And they should bow down from far. And Moshe, you yourself come unto me. All right? ויבוא משה ויספר לעם את כל דברי אדוני ואת כל המשפטים. And he comes to the people and he tells them two things. כל דברי אדוני, everything God said was דברי אדוני. He says, אלה הדברים אשר תדבר, the 10 commandments. ואת כל המשפטים, and all the laws or ordinances, right? Which is all of Parashat Mishpatim. He says, you tell them all of these things and see, do they still want to contract the berit now that they know the framework of the laws that they're going to have to keep? Vayan kol ha'am kol echad vayomeru, and the entire nation responds to Moshe and says, Kol ha'devarim asher diber Adonai na'aseh. Everything that God said, we will do. Again, what does that mean, we will do? Yes, we still want to contract this covenant with God. All right, by the way, this process resembles the exact same process of, according to halakha, of someone coming to convert. They come to convert. Well, according to halakha, what do you ask them first? To say, why do you want to be part of this nation? Right? So that's what happened. It says, do you want to be my nation? Do you want to be special to me? And you say yes. And then what do? And then modi'im lo miksat misvot. And then you don't teach them the entire Torah, you teach them some basic laws of the Torah. And only after that you say, do you still want to convert? And if they say yes, then we convert them. So that's exactly what God did. He said, do you want to be my special nation? And we said yes. He says, okay, I'm going to give you the basic framework of the Torah. All these main civil laws and holidays and Shabbat and Avodah Zarah. do you accept? And they said, yes, we still accept. So now they're going to contract the covenant. ויכתוב משה את כל דברי אדוני, and Moshe wrote all of this. וישכם משה בבוקר, ויבן מזבח תחת ההר. Then takes place on the next day, after Ma'aman Har Sinai, the next day, right? Moshe writes down, because ויקח ספר הברית, he writes a book of the covenant, which consists of the 10 commandments and Parashat Mishpatim, all those basic laws of Parashat Mishpatim. Vayikra be'oznei ha'am, and then he reads out the book to the people. He builds a big altar, and they bring and they do this whole ceremony, and they're sacrificing, slaughtering oxes, doing all sorts of korbanot. Vayikra be'oznei ha'am vayomiru, and he reads it out to the people, and they say, Kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh v'nishma. Everything that God says we will do, and we will listen. We will hear na'aseh v'nishma. What's the nishma here now? What's up until now they said na'aseh. Any idea? Na'aseh means we'll contract the berit. What does nishma mean?
To hear.
To hear what? They just heard the book.
Maybe to understand, like the reasons and everything.
They say whatever God says we're going to do. We don't need to know the reason. I don't need to know the reason. The reason, the ultimate reason for doing mitzvot is because God said so.
Exactly, but that's why they say it only after Naaseh.
Right, okay, very nice. Meaning we're going to do and try to investigate the reasoning behind it. But we'll do what God said because you said it. Okay, so remember now, right, they still didn't get the entire corpus of Jewish law. They didn't get the entire 613 mitzvot. But what they're saying is, we're going to make the contract now. We're going to sign it. We're signing the contract now. We're making a covenant with God now, even though we didn't receive all the 613 mitzvot yet. So it says, Na'aseh is we're going to do the contract. Venishma is we're going to hear, we're going to learn all the rest of the mitzvot. And right now, they're signing a contract. They call it in good faith, in goodwill. We trust you that the mitzvot that you haven't revealed to us yet, and that you were going to teach us now throughout the rest of the 40 years, we trust you that this is right. This is the mitzvot. You're not going to all of a sudden tell us, we need to stand on our heads for 10 hours a day, right? So it's something that we can do. We trust you that you're going to give us proper mitzvot. ויקח משה את הדם ויזרוק על העם. So what they did, how did they actually contract the berit? It says, well, they brought a lot of sacrifices, and half of the blood from the sacrifices they poured onto the altar, and half they collected in these basins, and they sprinkled it on the people. This is a covenant contracted in blood. And this is how they used to make covenants back in the past. The first one we can think of.
Nee, het nu op
anyone-
8. Maak het uitzien.
Sorry? The first berit like this that we see is with Abraham. Berit ben Betarim, the covenant in between the parcels. Because what did they do? They took animals and they cut them into two by bater batavich, and they put one on each side. Also, when Yitzhak when Yitzhak made a berit with Lavan, it was on the same basis. They say half here, half there. That's how they used to make covenants in the past. And so what did they do? So here they took the blood, half of them poured onto the mizbeach, resembling God's side of the covenant, of the contract, and half on the people, for the people's side of the contract. ויזרוק משה את הדם, ויקח משה את הדם, ויזרוק על העם, and he sprinkled it, threw it on the people. ויאמר, and he said, הנה דם הברית, this is the blood of the covenant. אשר כרת אדוני עמכם על כל הדברים האלה, that God contracted with you on all of these things that were read out to them in the book of the covenant. All right, and then they go up, right, and then they have the Zekenim, they have a vision of God. We won't get into that. It says, "Vayomer Hashem and Moshe," and God says to Moshe, "Ale elai hahara v'heyesham," says, "Come up to the mountain and stay here with me for a short while, and I will give you ve'etena lecha et luchot ha'even." I'll give you the stone tablets. Right now, the 10 Commandments were spoken, right, out loud to the people and written in a book. He says, "Come up, and I'm going to give you the stone tablets." Torah, and I'm going to give you the Torah and the mitzvah. Asher katavti nehorotam. So he's giving Moshe 3 things up in the mountain: the stone tablets, the Torah, which is the written law, or what was written up until then, the Parashat Mishpatim, the mitzvah, and the mitzvah is the oral law, the oral tradition. Every time it says mitzvah in the book, in the Bible, it's always talking about the oral tradition, what was explained to them off by heart, orally. ויקום משה ויהושע משרתו ויעל משה להר אל הר האלוהים, and Moshe goes up, and he's up there. It says, ויהי משה בהר 40 יום ו40 לילה. And Moshe goes up to the mountain, and he's there receiving these 3 things from God for 40 days and 40 nights. And this is the contracting of the Berit. However, the Berit, let's see, even Google Docs got all messed up over here. All right. Where are we? So keeps repeating itself. And he's up. Okay, so Moshe is up there for 40 days, receiving. He's actually receiving the entire 613 mitzvot during those 40 days. However, it takes him 40 years, or it takes us 40 years to learn the 613 mitzvot, which Moshe received received most of them during those 40 days. Okay? However, we still didn't receive all of the mitzvot. And what happens is, I lost those sources. It's in Parashat, I'm going to open it up again here. In Parashat Ki Tisa, in the book of Deuteronomy, it was chapter 28, I think. Okay. Right? So right now, the people contracted the Berit on the basis of Parashat Mishpatim and the 10 Commandments. However, they still didn't receive the entire 613 mitzvot. So at the end of the 40 years, when they receive all of the mitzvot, they need to ratify the covenant with God, so that it now includes everything. So at the end of Parashat, of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, right, we're at the end of the 40 years before the people go in to the land. Sorry, this is the chapter before, actually. All right. Vaisav Moshe v'ziknei Yisrael et ha'am lemor. Right, and so now Moshe is coming to the elders, or with the elders, right? The elders, maybe some of them were like Yehoshua and Pinchas, were there in the original contracting of the Berit. because most of the nation has been replaced now. They all died out through the 40 years, and there's a new generation, new people. So they gather the people and they say to them, Shamor et kol ha-mizvah asher anochi mesaveh etchem. Says, follow all the commandments which I have taught you now during these 40 years. V'haya bayom asher ta'avru et ha-yarden in haaretz. It says, and when you cross into the land of the covenant, right? When you cross the Jordan into the land, Asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach, the land that He's giving you, v'hakemota lecha avanim gedolot, you shall erect these big boulders, these big pillars, v'sata otam basid, and you should cover them with plaster, make them nice and white. Why? V'chatavta alehen, because you're going to write on these boulders, et kol divrei haTorah hazot be'ovrecha. It says, because when you pass over and you get into the land, you need to write down all the Torah on these boulders. It's going to be somewhere that's very central, that's going to be accessible to everyone, right? למען אשר תבוא אל הארץ, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נתן לך, ארץ זבת חלב ודבש. All right, this is the land that God promised you of milk and honey. והיה בעוברכם את הירדן. Right, it'll come to pass when you pass the Yarden, you cross the Jordan. תקימו את האבנים האלה, אשר אנוכי מסווה אתכם היום. You shall erect these boulders בהר עיבל. Right, they're going to be on Har Eval, Mount Eval, וסתה אותם בסיד. All right, and this actually takes place right in between Har Eval and Har Gerizim. I understand that recently you were on a trip up to the Shomron, right? You went to Har Kabir, and over there you look over Shechem, right? Nablus, you see the city of Nablus is sitting right in between Har Eval and Har Gerizim, right? Known as Har Beracha, the mountain of the blessing, and Har Kelala, the mountain of the curse, right? So you're going to erect this over there, right there, and that's where you're going to ratify the covenant. And v'zavachta shilamim, again, you're going to bring korbanot over there, ve'achalta sham, v'samachta, right? You're going to eat there, and it's going to be a big ceremony, a big celebration. Nifnei Adonai Elohecha. V'chatavta al avanim et kol divrei haTorah hazot ba'er hetev. And you're going to write on these boulders the entire Torah, right, in detail. Okay, and then in Sefer Yehoshua, after they cross into the land, all right, this is at the end of this chapter. אז יבנה יהושע מזבח לאדוני אלוהי ישראל בהר עיבל. They cross into the land, they come to Har Eval, and Yehoshua builds an altar over there. כאשר ציווה משה עבד אדוני את בני ישראל, as Moshe commanded the people. ככתוב בספר תורת משה, as written in the Torah that Moshe gave us. מזבח אבנים שלמות, אשר לא הניף עליהן ברזל. And it's going into the description of the מזבח as commanded. ויעלו עליו עולות, and they bring the sacrifices, ויזבחו שנמים. ויכתוב שם, and they write there, על האבנים, on those boulders, את משנה תורת משה אשר כתב לפני בני ישראל. And they write there the Torah that Moshe wrote to wrote for them and gave to the people. On Moshe's last day, he wrote a Sefer Torah for all the tribes. And now that they come here, they're writing the Sefer Torah on these boulders. They're bringing sacrifices, and they're splitting the nation into two, half on Har Eval, half on Har Gerizim, where they give the Beracha and where they give the Kelala, as instructed by Moshe. This is now the completion of contracting the Berit. So the Berit itself, the covenant itself, it started off with a general proposal, the people said, yes, we accept, without even knowing yet what they're getting into, but they didn't contract it yet. He says, we accept your proposal. And then it says, okay, I'm going to establish Moshe's credibility by speaking to him. And then he reads out the basic laws that this covenant is going to be based on. And they say, okay, they contracted the Berit, but now in order to ratify it, to make it, to seal the Berit, they still need to learn all the 613 mitzvot, which takes an entire generation to do. And the sealing of the Berit at the end takes place in the land of Israel, the land of the covenant. That's part of the covenant, and not in some no man's land in the wilderness. Over there, they contracted that they're going to make a Berit, but they only establish it in the land, the place today known as Shechem, right in between the two mountains, Har Eval and Har Gerizim. Okay, so oh, by the way, also, why is it so important that this is an intergenerational covenant? Is because it's an everlasting covenant from generation to generation. So it's not just a one person who took place in that covenant, or one generation. It was intergenerational, and it continues on through testimony in the courts from one generation to another, to another, to another, until today. I see someone is asking a question. Sandra?
Yes, thank you, Sami. I do have a question. I wasn't sure earlier you had mentioned this is the blood of the covenant, or did you say this is the book of the covenant? I wasn't sure I heard you correctly. Both.
Both. There
Okay.
was the book. There was a book
Mhm.
that they read out to the people, and then the contracting of the covenant was when they spilled the blood of the sacrifices, half of it onto the altar, and half was sprinkled onto the people.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that and clarifying. So it's actually both of them. Okay.
Both, yes,
Thank you.
both.
תודה רבה.
Pleasure, pleasure. So what happens when the people don't listen? By the way, so if we go back to the proposal, where everybody gets it, sorry to say, everybody gets it wrong. What was the proposal, right? It says, Im tishmeu bekoli ushmartem et beriti, right? If you listen to my voice and keep the covenant, vitim li sigulami kol ha'amim, will be a treasured people or a chosen people. This took place the moment we contracted the covenant. Once the covenant was signed and contracted the next day on the 7th of Sivan in the morning, right? That's it. We're the chosen people. End of story. If we follow the mitzvot, says, Untancha Elohim elyon al kol goyei haaretz, then you will be a mighty nation, you will be above everyone, you will lead the world, you'll be a superpower. And if you don't, then you have all these curses, you're going to be persecuted, you're going to be running from one corner of the earth to the other. But we're always going to be vitim segulam mikol ha'amim, because this was the berit that we contracted. And says, if you follow, so what does it mean, im tishmeu bekoli? I like to explain this. It's not if you listen to my voice, it's if you hear my voice. The moment we stood there at Har Sinai and God spoke to us, that event turned the nation into a special nation. And there's many midrashim about this, about kafal em tahar kigigit, that God seemingly seems like he forced the Torah on us, Torah mutav, right? But then you see all the other nations that come and they say, wait a minute, why didn't you offer the Torah to us? And the Midrash says, God went and he offered it to all the nations, but they declined. So then what do the nations have to say? They say, oh, we declined, but maybe the Jewish people would have also declined. Why didn't you kafita tahar, put over to the mountain on us like you did to the Jewish people? He says, no, but they did that after they already accepted the covenant. What that Midrash comes to teach us, though, isn't that God forced it on us. He made us special in a way where while all the other nations can be left to logic and try to deduce whether God exists or doesn't exist, they have no actual real proof of God's existence. The Jewish people don't have that anymore. The moment they heard God's voice, that takes away the doubt of God's existence. And that's what makes us a special people. It's having that intuition of God's existence. Okay? So, this takes place at the moment of Shamoah Tishme'u Bekuli, not listening to my voice, but hear my voice. Once they heard that Kol Shofar, right? At that moment, they became special. And then they contracted the Berit, so that if they follow the Misvot, then they will be a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. And if not, they will be a persecuted and humiliated nation. And now we arrive to in the book of Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, he says, let's see, is this here? I'm telling you, 5 minutes before the class, Word decided to crash, and I had to, here we go. Hinei yamim ba'im, Neum Hashem. All right, up, where'd it go? Here, New Covenant says, behold, the days are coming. V'karati et Beit Yisrael v'et Beit Yehuda berit hadasha. And I'm going to make a new covenant with the house of Judah and the house of Israel. Lo kaberit asher karati et avutam. Not like the berit that the covenant that I contracted with their forefathers, with their ancestors, beyom hezeki beyadam notziam me'eretz Mitzrayim. Right, on the day that I, so to speak, grabbed them by the hand to pull them out of Egypt. Asher hem ha'eferu beriti, which they have went against this covenant. So what does this mean? Is that covenant null and void? Is now he needs to come and make a new covenant? It says, Kizot berit asher echrot et Beit Yisrael achrei hayamim hahem. This is the covenant I will make with them. It says, Natati et Torati bekilbam. I'm going to give them my Torah. Va'al libam ichtavena. I'm going to write it on their hearts. Maybe not write it on stone, but we're going to write it on their hearts. V'hayiti lahem le'elohim, and I will be their God. V'hem hayu li le'am, and they will be my nation. But this actually already took place. And in my opinion, it needs to and will take place again. All right, in the book of Nehemiah, we go after the people stopped following, they were doing Avodah Zarah, they stopped following the covenant, and they were sent out to exile, and they became a persecuted, humiliated nation in Babel, right, in Babylon, and then in Persia. And then the Persians, Koresh, King Cyrus, said you could come back to Eretz Israel and rebuild Jerusalem. And they started building the walls. And when they wanted to build the temple, they were stopped, they were halted. They couldn't build the temples. It's like today, we built Jerusalem, but we still didn't build the temple. We're stuck on that. And then what they did, where is Nehemiah here? I had Nehemiah open. Here we go, Nehemiah. Now on the 24th day of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting and second, all right, Psachim v'adama alehem, v'ibadelu zera Yisrael mikol b'nei nechar. What does it say over here, back in Jeremiah? Where is it here? He says, the days will come and I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah, the seed of man and the seed of beast. It's a very, very bizarre verse. What does that mean? And shall come to pass, right? As I wanted to break them down and destroy them and overthrow them, I will watch over them to build and to plant, right? They're going to rebuild the city. What does that mean? The seed of man and the seed of beast. Well, in the language of the Nevi'im, that man only refers to people who are part of, who follow the Torah. Atem you are considered man, and the rest of humanity, well, they're just a more evolved, they're just a more evolved ape, animal. All right, only once you make the berit are you, or once you reject Avodah Zarah, once you follow at least the 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach, right? Only then are you not considered a beast anymore. And this is exactly the opening to when times of Ezra and Nehemiah, they remade a covenant with God. It says, and the seed of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners. Says that's exactly the opening to the Brit. Right, and they stood up in their place and read in the book of the law of the Lord. So now it's no longer just Perashat Mishpatim. They have a whole Sefer Torah, and they're reading out from the Sefer Torah. And it took them quite a few hours to do. And now all the representatives of the nation are standing there. You have the Levi'im, and you have the ministers, right? We're not going to read all of this. I recommend reading all of this, right? But we're not going to read it here. Let's go to the next chapter. Yeah. It says, Uvchol zot, and after all of they bring all these blessings, you are the Lord who made a covenant with Abraham, and you changed his name from Abraham to Abraham, right? And you took our fathers out of Egypt, and you gave them the Torah, and then they transgressed the Torah, and you sent them out, but you had mercy on them, and you brought them back, right? Uvchol zot, and after all of this, anachnu kortim amana, right? And yet, for all this, we make sure covenant and subscribe it. We are now contracting a berit, and our princes and our Levites and our priests set their seal onto it. They're actually signing a paper. It's like they're writing out all of their commitments now, and all of these representatives of the nation are signing the commitment, and they call it an amanah. It's a covenant that they're making, and so on, right? And they emphasize in that covenant that, we're not going to intermarry, and we're going to keep the Shabbat, and we're going to keep the Shemitah, and we're going to keep all the mitzvot of the Torah as was commanded to us by Moshe. All right? So what is the new covenant? All right, Shavuot is many times referred to as the marriage of God with the Jewish people, right? I'm Moroccan. I'm from Moroccan descent. We actually have a minhag when we open up the Heichal to take out the Sefer Torah on Shavuot. We read. It's called a ketubah. Same way that when a couple gets married, they have a ketubah. We read out a ketubah because Shavuot is the day that Am Yisrael and the nation of the Jewish people married God. And sometimes, right, in a marriage, it goes on for a long time. Sometimes parties in the couple that don't always behave properly, but if they last for a long time, then sometimes they have a renewal of their vows after 25 years or after 50 years of marriage. So what is a Berit Hadashah? Is they're not making anything new in the Torah. The Torah is the same Torah, God is the same God, and the people are the same people. They're just renewing their commitment to keeping the Torah. That is what Yirmiyahu is talking about when he says Berit Hadashah. And when he comes to say that it's going to be different, the later Berit is going to be different than the earlier Berit, right? He says, Lo ka Berit. This is not, here, look what he says here. Lo ka Berit shekarati avutam. Not like the covenant that I contracted with their ancestors. B'yom hezeki b'yadam, the day I held their hands and pulled them out of Egypt. What does that mean? It says when God took us out of Egypt, He did everything for us. Saying Hebrew, Mashaba b'kalut olech b'kalut. What comes easy goes easy. It says when God did everything for us, it was back then the people were still entrenched in Avodah Zarah. They kept going back to Avodah Zarah. It says what happens now in the times of Israel and Nehemiah is the people, they came back and they had to fight for Jerusalem every single day. The book of Nehemiah describes how the people, they would be holding their sword or their spear in one hand and building the wall in the other. It says under those conditions, the people don't go back, don't default back to Avodah Zarah. All right. Now we're back in Eretz Israel after 2,000 years of a galut. Right? We've been persecuted. We've been sent out from one corner of the world to another. We've been humiliated. We've come back. We're establishing ourselves now as a regional superpower. It says if we follow the Torah fully, we'll establish ourselves as a global superpower. We'll be the ones leading the free world. Right? And it hasn't been easy. The past 100 years haven't been easy. And we're working hard. And once we get to that point where the people are ready to make a new covenant, not to replace the previous one, but to renew the commitment of Am Yisrael to God, so that God can also use us as His representatives in this world to lead the free world, then the time will come that we need to gather ourselves and have our leaders in our names, the names of the entire nation, sign a new covenant, a renewal of the covenant with God, and turn the Torah into our constitution. Any questions? All right, that's it for today. Unless anyone has any questions.
I did, but you answered it perfectly. Thank you, Sami.
Okay, I'm glad to hear. Pleasure. A pleasure.